Hey, welcome to the Pressure Washing Pastor Podcast. My name is Joshua Brown, and I am excited to share with you a little bit about my friend today. His name is Dave Miller, and he's married to Ann Miller, and we're going to listen a little bit about his story. Just want to remind you, we're in a series right now where I'm challenging you to change the way that you think or what you think about. Oftentimes, we get stuck inside of social media, podcasts, books, and all of our attention and focus becomes on marketing, sales, operations, services, and cash flow, even leadership, which are all beautiful things to think about, and we need to as business owners. But what if we started chewing on other things besides those things, and some things that might trump those things? And that is what God is doing here on planet Earth. I believe that God is calling Christians to be missionaries in the marketplace, that we were never called to separate our lives, our work from his mission on this planet. And I just want to challenge you. If you're a Christian, you're missionary. If you're a Christian, you're missionary. You are called to be and make disciples along with the work of what God is doing here on planet Earth. And so let me call you to a greater purpose. Would you do me a favor also? Invite other friends that you know that are kingdom-minded entrepreneurs, former pastors, church planners, disciple-making networks. We need to change the way that we think about life. And it starts by remembering our stories and hearing how God has come into other people's stories. And so today, you're going to be hearing from my friend Dave on how God has changed his life and then how he has answered some of life's most toughest questions, which would be meaning, purpose, what we do with our work, and then also what his one thing is. And without further ado, here's my friend, Dave Miller. Dave, can I call you a friend?
Yeah, we've met each other long enough. You can call me a friend, Josh. Thanks for having me, bud.
Yeah, thank you. You're a friend of a friend, and I believe Rusty Gunn introduced us two together. And whenever somebody introduces somebody to somebody else, you know that this person has purpose in the conversation. And so I didn't go seek you out, but you were actually sent by someone that said, I really think that Dave would be a good person for us to have a conversation with today. So I just appreciate you being here.
Well, anybody who's a friend of Rusty Gunn automatically becomes cool, because how many people get to have a name like his running around planet Earth these days? But yeah, Rusty's been a friend of mine since all the way back in 1998. My wife actually went to high school with him and was in the same church as his father whenever he was doing worship ministry in a little town called Cushing, Oklahoma. So we've known each other for quite a long time.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. When I first met Rusty, and then he told me all of his children's name, it kind of blew me away. And if you haven't listened to Rusty's podcast yet, make sure you go back to 2 weeks ago and listen to my friend Rusty share. It's probably been one of my favorite podcasts thus far. And so if you haven't heard his story and the name of his children, you'll want to go check out that podcast. And so without any further ado, the first question that I ask is sometimes the most difficult, and it is, who is Dave Miller?
Well, I'm an Oklahoma born and bred guy, and currently we're living in Oklahoma City. We are engaged in dry cleaning franchises here in Oklahoma City. We've been doing that for the last 10 years. But that was after about 15 years in ministry, and then God dropped us right into the middle of business and also doing church planning at the same time. So it's been quite a journey, but we've really enjoyed the last 10 years in particular.
That's so good. And would you really quickly, are you married? Do you have any kids? Let us know a little bit of your stage of life.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I have been married for 23 years, and we have 5 children. Our oldest is turning 21 in August. And we got 3 boys that are 21, 17, 15, and then we've got twin girls that are turning 13 on Saturday. And so we have a full house. We have a lot of activity. We have a lot of fun, a house full of 4 teenagers and one that's just about out. There's never a dull moment in the Miller home, I promise you.
Yeah, I love it. We have 6 kids. I don't know if I shared that with you prior to today. And we range from 22 down to 2. And my 22-year-old is getting married in 2.5 weeks. And so, Yeah, thank you so much. I got 5 more to marry off, but it's going to take forever. I'm literally going to be 70 before my last one probably gets married, which makes me feel really old. But if you've been thinking about, whether or not you should have more children or not, my encouragement would be go for it. I don't think at the end of our lives we'll look back and regret having our kids. I think it's a beautiful thing. So, Dave, when it comes to our lives, we kind of have a before we met Christ, how we met Christ, and life after Christ. Would you take us back to, looking through before you met Jesus, a little bit about who you were, what life looked like, maybe a little bit of your pre-testimony to how you met Jesus?
So my family has been Christian for generations, and it's a grace gift that I'm a fourth generation believer in my family. As far as I know, it may go further back than that. But I tell everyone, my mom was a director of the nursery at the church that I grew up in. So I was literally gestated in church even. So I've been there my entire life. But around 6 years old, I really struggled with a lot of selfishness and just authority. I'm still kind of that way. But I remember whenever I was a young boy, about 6 years old, started asking some significant questions about Jesus. And my dad sat down with me, took his little red Bible out, and he just walked me through how Jesus came down from heaven and lived an absolutely perfect life, that he died on the cross for my sin and for the things that I had done wrong. Even though he deserved life, he took my death. And then 3 days later, he rose from the dead and ascended to the Father, and then now offers salvation to all of us. And he just asked me when I was a young little boy, do you believe that Jesus died, buried, and rose from the dead? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, well, do you want to follow him? And as good as a 6-year-old could understand it, that day I chose to follow Jesus. My dad led me in a small prayer, and I was baptized the week later. And that all worked really, really well till about high school, whenever I decided that it wasn't super popular to be a follower of Jesus, and decided I'm going to go a little bit of a different path. And I started to test the limits of what God was going to allow in my life. And to truncate a story, I had a best friend named Buffalo Arpoca, a Native American boy I went to high school with here in Oklahoma. And we started getting into trouble together, and his grandma sent him away to where I live now, Oklahoma City, because he was being influenced by the bad kid. And I wasn't supposed to be the bad kid. I was a good kid, right? I lived both worlds really well. And his grandma figured me out. Buff went away, ended up trusting Christ himself. And on a Sunday morning, he came back my junior year, and he had been gone for about 6 months. And he walked up, had a cross shaved in the back of his hair and a T-shirt on that had a cross with a little note on it that said, I've gone away to prepare a place. I'll be back to get you soon, Jesus. And when he walked up, he said, hey, Dave, what are you doing? And I said, oh, Buff. I started acting like, we were in the old high school days. And he said, were we best friends? And I said, yeah, until you left, and kind of gave him a hard time. And he said, I got one question for you. If you knew Jesus and you knew that I was going to be separated from God for eternity without him, how come you never told me the story of Jesus and were willing to let me be separated from God if you were my best friend? And that was a turning point for me, because the Lord just crushed me, because here my best friend was, and I was blaming him for leaving, and he was coming back and saying, I'm a believer now, and you never told me why. That was a very powerful, changing moment for me.
Wow. And how old were you at that moment?
17. Yeah, it was a junior in high school. Had just turned 17.
Did you end up responding immediately, or did you have to chew on that for a while? Did anything change as a result of that conversation? Hey, I'm going to interrupt for a second, because we've got a phenomenal opportunity for you. If you've been thinking about opening your own pressure washing company, I'd like to invite you to a free webinar. There we'll talk about the pros and cons of opening a pressure washing, and you'll get to chat with our team about whether or not you should launch a pressure washing company in your city or not. To register for this free event, go to pressurewashingpastor.com, scroll down to the little registration button, it's blue, and click on it, and we'll take care of the rest. I look forward to seeing you there. Have a great day. Now back to our show.
Yeah, so I knew very clearly. He actually grabbed me by the collar and dragged me down to the front row of the church to sit that morning. And I went to a church that had 30 people in it, in a small, I'm a farm boy, grew up on a ranch, small town, Oklahoma. And I didn't understand, hear, listen to, pay attention to anything in the message, because the Spirit of God clearly was saying to me in that moment, I've called you to preach the gospel. And if you do not turn to me right now, I'm going to pull from you the purpose for which I created you. I'm going to take away from you the opportunity and the giftings and everything. I knew, he said, I created you to do something, and I'm about to give you life because you know me. But if you don't know me, I'm going to take away the purpose for which I created you. And some people may argue with that or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I knew that God said, what I have in store for you is not going to be what I give you if you do not repent and turn now. And I just turned into a blubbering idiot. I couldn't even, I went down front like you're supposed to. And the pastor said, what's going on? And I was like, just crying. And he said, are you called to the ministry? And I said, yeah, I didn't know how to explain anything at that point. And so I wasn't any good at music. I wasn't old enough to be a senior pastor. And so the next Sunday, that small church made me the youth minister, and I started teaching Sunday school.
Let's go. Hey, and did that start just your career and your trajectory from there? Kind of what took place from there? Walk me through the next 20 years of life.
Yeah. So really, it is really the next 25 years, because I'm 44 now. And I knew at that moment that I was called to the ministry. And my understanding of ministry at that point was very vocational oriented, very, I would say sacred secular divide was very much a part of the conversation. And so I did what I knew I was supposed to do, or what I understood from the community that I was in, that ministry was about. So I just started making a beeline into full-time ministry at that point. And that took me through Oklahoma, Iowa, Kentucky, North Carolina, and New Mexico. And that took our family through youth ministry. I went into full-time ministry almost immediately. 2 years later, I was in full-time ministry. And I did youth ministry. I did education ministry. I did senior pastor ministry over the next really 15 years in all those states. And picked up a couple of seminary degrees along the way. And about 10 years ago, the Lord said to us while we were in Roswell, New Mexico, of all places, that he wanted us to go into church planting. And I'd always been a starter and always enjoyed the starting side of ministry. And so I went the traditional route, was going to fundraise, was doing all those kind of things to do like a 5-year plan, $400,000 fundraising, going to start a traditional church, those kind of things. And I was terrible at fundraising. I only fundraised about $3,000 when we were only about 6 months away from leaving. And I was in a small group disciples making group at the time because I was really leaning into what does multiplicational disciple making look like. And I was really leaning into at that time what was really called the missional conversation. And I was really starting to question some of the traditional methods that were really addition focused, not because I thought that they were a terrible thing, but I was seeing the way that they were not getting to multiplication. And I was wanting to take that foundation that had been built in my life from that traditional church that I had been in for so long. And I wanted to push it into the church that wasn't yet. And so I was like, I understand the church that is, but God was really growing my heart for the church that will be. And so as we moved into that season, I was in a Bible study weekly, reading 20 to 30 chapters of scripture with two guys and asking, what are we learning? What are we going to do about it? As a senior pastor at First Baptist Church, Roswell, New Mexico. And one Monday when we met, the guys asked me, what'd you learn? And I said, I learned that Paul said in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians that he didn't covet anyone's silver or gold, but he worked to demonstrate that if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. And they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, the Lord's telling me I can't fundraise anymore. Like he just said, you're not allowed to fundraise. You're going to go to work to set that example. And the guy that was sitting across from me at the table goes, well, what does that look like? And I said, I have no idea. Like I'm in a ministry for 15 years, good. The classic, what is a pastor going to do outside of the pastorate? And I had been in professional ministry for 15 years. So that was my identity, Josh. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that is who I was. And all my relationships, my network, everything was built around that. And he said, well, the Lord told me as I was reading 1st and 2nd Thessalonians that I needed to support you. And he goes, I'm a businessman and you're a church planter. So why don't I just help you start some stuff when you move to Oklahoma City? Let's start a company or start some jobs, or maybe you can build some spec houses in neighborhoods. Because he was construction by trade. He goes, but let's talk about this. And long story made short is, over the course of the next 4 months, I went from full-time fundraised, start traditional church, to completely volunteer in the church planting and completely 100% business in the way that we were going to make money, and started moving towards opening dry cleaning franchises in Oklahoma City. Found a piece of dirt, built a building, started a business, and here we are 10 years later.
Wow, it's incredible. And so today, man, that's so good. And so you went from being a Sunday school teacher, youth pastor, to full-time on staff, to church planter, to now in many ways a business entrepreneur. And, we'll get into kind of what you do in a few minutes. But I want to get into this. Like, during the time that you were a pastor, did you ever have people come to you and just want to know what the purpose or meaning of life is? I remember many times I'd have students come to me, and adults and dads want to know like purpose. And I know from my own journey, I think during the worst times of my life, or the lowest parts of my life, I've contemplated meaning and why we're here. Have you come to a conclusion on why we're even here on planet Earth to begin with?
Yes. And I will say that over the years, even as a full-time pastor, now transitioned to business owner / church planter, the way in which I articulate purpose has drastically shifted, but the core has not really changed. And that is, we're here to know Christ and to make him known. If I was to narrow it down, Jesus said, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." And I would say that when we know Christ and we do as Christ did, that we follow not only his message, but also his methods, that we get to live a life just like he did, which was to the glory of God the Father. And so I think our purpose at the end of the day is to glorify the Father by knowing Christ, trusting in his message, and following his methods, so that we can become fishers of men.
So good. When I think about why we're doing what we're doing, it's really to invite pastors and ministers, former pastors, people who thought they had a calling on their life, but things didn't work out inside of what I would call sometimes a roller coaster experience. When you transitioned from, pastor to a business owner or starting a new business, you mentioned there was an identity crisis. Do you remember those emotions and feelings, and kind of like the season of life that you were transitioning with your identity issue?
The crisis is a very kind word to use. Josh, it's like, it was, I would say that the overhaul of my identity and my understanding of what makes things matter, and said, "Lord, I'm going to do everything that you've called me to do" at 17 years old. It was that significant of a change for me, because I began to realize how much my identity had become tied up with not just Jesus alone, but being the professional pastor that people look to as the example for Christian. And it was subtle, and I didn't realize how subtle it had become. But then whenever no one was asking me questions every week, I wasn't in front of crowds preaching every week, when no one at Walmart knew who I was anymore, walking down the road, I realized how much my acceptance and desire for people knowing that I was a pastor was wrapped up into who I was and what made me satisfied. And so when I hit the ground here in Oklahoma City, no one knew me, no one cared. And then whenever I was in Oklahoma City, and people, even in the pastor world, the people would ask me, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm a business owner." And I watched pastors not dismiss me, but I could tell they didn't accept me the way that they did before, because my credentials, my platform, my purpose of who I was didn't fit for them anymore. But then whenever I talked with business owners or other businessmen, and they were like, "Well, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, we're planting churches through our business." then the business owners would smile at me and they'd be like, okay, great. That's really nice. But you're kind of, we really don't want you to do with you. Don't pastors do that? And so what I ended up finding was I didn't have a community anymore. No one understood me, whether on the pastoral side or the business side. And I just kind of left out in Twilight Zone a little bit. And I had to go through a season to where I decided I'm going to do exactly what the Lord tells me to do.
Come
and
on.
then I'm going to have to build community around what I
Come
see
on.
and know the Lord wants me to do, because I just didn't have anybody. And I don't know if I can use the word sucked on your podcast. If you need to edit it out, I'm sorry, but that's the best way I know to describe it.
You have to spell it. That's what I do, is SUCK.
It was terrible, Josh. Like, it was terrible until I finally came and the Lord said, am I enough?
Come on.
Like, yeah, whenever he said, am I enough? And I said, yeah, I mean, you're enough. And then he said, then follow me. Like, all over again, he said, just trust me and follow me. And so that's what we've been trying to do.
When I first started my own pressure washing business, I did not know what soft washing was, nor did I know marketing, sales, or even how to manage my finances.
Take the guesswork out of it. We have taken all of the knowledge we've gotten and wrapped it into video courses. It's a 7-figure blueprint for a pressure washing company that you can get at pressurewashingpastor.com. Go there, scroll down to video courses, and purchase it. We guarantee you'll get the value or your money back.
So go ahead and click pause, head over to the website. Now, unclick pause and back to your show. Yeah. Hey, let me go ahead and stop and encourage. Maybe I should even ask you, if somebody's listening to this and they're dealing with where you were as far as like life SUCKs as it relates to my identity or where I belong, what words of hope or encouragement would you speak into their lives?
I would say that for me, Josh, where it all came together is when I realized that the work was not separate. And if you'll take just a moment let me to explain that. In Genesis, we're created to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth, to have dominion over it and subdue it. And so reproduction and multiplication is built into the very core DNA of what it means to be human. And so disciple making and having babies is what God has called us to do, because we're to fill the earth with image bearers. And so we have spiritual children through disciple making. We have physical children through our marriages and our relationships. And our job is to teach both of those, what it means to know Christ and to make him known. And then God gave us a calling, and God gave us a vocation to work with our hands and to take what he created us for in Eden and to spread the whole earth, not only with image bearers, but also with the work of the hands of the image bearers as we multiply creation all over. And then I combined that idea with what it means to be human. Like, that is the fundamental core of what it means to be human. It's the very things that we see Jesus doing, because he was the perfect human. And then we see in Acts 13 and 14 that Luke actually uses the word "the work" to describe the ministry of Paul and Barnabas on the first church planting journey. And so in 13:2, it says that the Holy Spirit set apart Paul and Barnabas for the work to which he had called them. And then after they go through Cyprus, Antioch Pisidian, Iconium, Lystra, and Derbe, the Bible says that they preached the gospel, they made many disciples, they went back through the churches and encouraged all of the believers, they established elders, and when they were done with all of that, they went back to Antioch. And in chapter 14, verse 26, it said that they then shared with them the work that had been accomplished. And the Lord has shown me over the last 10 years that the work is the gospel, and multiplication of not only my family and of disciples is to do the work. So in my right hand, I've got the kingdom. In the left hand, I've got my vocation. And those are not works in plural for me. That has become the work that I am called to do. And I think that that's something that every single person that breathes should understand and know that is how it goes about.
Yeah, it's so good. You're my people. In 2020, in December, left vocational ministry and had an absolutely identity crisis. Went to multiple churches. My kids, we didn't even talk about it, how your kids experienced your crisis. it plays a massive role in the identity of the family, because now they're switching churches, or they used to associate themselves being one thing, and now they're like, what's going on with dad? Why are we transitioning here? And then going from pastor to who knows what. It confuses everybody that's a part of the journey. And it took about 1.5 years until someone said, there goes the pressure washing pastor at a secular business event. And I like ducked my head. I was like, pastor, I'm not in a pulpit. I don't have a church anywhere. Like, what are they doing calling me pastor? And that's when I realized, well, I wouldn't even say it was there. It took about 1 year later, where it's like, who you are is who you are, where you are, despite what titles, where you get your money from. A pastor or a missionary or a minister of the gospel has, this goes into the ministry of reconciliation, where it's like, I believe all of us have been called. Anybody who's been reconciled by the blood of Christ has also been invited into this work of being an ambassador, where God is making his plea through us to be reconciled unto him. And to divide it is just bananas. I don't know where I got it's bananas. It's bananas. I don't even know where we get it from. But I know that there's a predominant thought inside of many church organizations and church planting philosophies that don't qualify a tent-making business as a legitimate church planting, disciple making, and it's crazy. It's, if anything, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think I was in that category. If you were to talk to me 10 years ago, I would have wholeheartedly divided it. I would have said I didn't divide it. But when I was a pastor of a church, I would look at a businessman and I would think, honestly, and even repetitively, humbly, I arrogantly looked at them as someone to hold a door or to give money or maybe to give some good leadership because they had some skills, or maybe jump on the finance team. And what I didn't understand is that they were living in the very cross section of our city that creates the avenues for the gospel to spread across relational lines. And they were the greatest asset to the kingdom that was in the church if they had been released with the gospel instead of coveted by our particular community and body for the purposes of just the institutional organizational thinking, and sent and released and equipped. And it was mind-boggling how much I missed over those years, but I'm thankful that the Lord has granted me the grace to begin to live it out and to see it in a new way.
Yeah. If someone is starting to process this conversation or thinking about like what it would look like to transition or to move into their own business, what advice would you have them of as far as like, hey, if someone is hearing your story? For me, I train people to become, pressure washing pastors or to use the home service business. And we coach one-on-one and workshops. If you were trying to encourage somebody that's thinking about making a transition, where would you point them to, or what thoughts should they be chewing on next?
Yeah. So we have now in Oklahoma City, we have multiple teams that are focused out on church planting in multiple segments of our city here in Oklahoma City. Sometimes unreached people group specific, sometimes segment specific, sometimes business specific. But every single person who's doing church planting in our network in Oklahoma City is full-time job. They work a regular old job and they do the ministry as for free, doing church planting and starting churches in homes for free. And
what?
As we have been, yeah. So everybody in our network has jobs. Nobody's paid to do it. And as we have seen dozens of them come through, we have people doing the same things now. We've got them in Colombia, we've got them in Japan, we've got them in Canada, we've got them in Singapore. They're across the United States. They're in New York. We could just talk where they're spread out. Kansas, God has just taken them everywhere. And guess what? I'll give you a perfect example. If I could just share a real story of a real transition of a real person. His name is Gustavo Ocanto. He came here from Venezuela. His wife was a university student, and he was here illegally with her. And so because he was illegal, he couldn't get any of the paperwork. He was going through the process, but it was a reality of his life, and he was working under the table for cash. Okay? Doesn't matter what you think otherwise. It was just the reality for him. So we'll set aside all of the political discussion and just say, We're working with a real human being in a real place in life. And our goal was to say, we don't care what's going on in your life. What we care about is, do you know Christ? He came to Christ and was baptized. And he was a coder, a very good coder, by the way, a software design engineer. And he couldn't get any work because of that. And what happened to him is that the Venezuelan government fell apart. His passport expired. He couldn't get his passport renewed because the consulate no longer existed, because his government no longer existed. And so here he is in the United States as an illegal. He can't leave because he has an expired passport. He can't go back to his home country to get his passport renewed because his government basically is no longer functioning. And he has no idea what he's supposed to do or where he's supposed to go. Long story made short, he found a job with a software company, app company called Be My Guest in Singapore. They're basically Airbnb of Asia. The vice president of that company was a Spanish speaker from Mexico City. She met him. She loved him. They spoke Spanish together. He was able to get all of his documents through Singapore, and they gave him a work permit. So he moved to Singapore. In the process of him getting through all that stuff, we trained him how to share the gospel. We trained him how to just meet his friends and family, how to reach out to coworkers, how to reach out to anybody who was there with a simple way to say, here's how you share the gospel. If someone decides to come to Christ, here's how you baptize them. And if someone wants to follow Jesus, here's a simple process that you can use to help people learn how to start following Jesus. And we said, Gustavo, you can do all of this. His job, his work, took him to Singapore. He's been there now for 7 years. And since he's been there for 7 years, there's 4 churches that are planted by Gustavo because he started sharing the gospel as a software engineer, just living in Singapore like a regular human being and an immigrant like everybody else. And he started riding dirt bikes, mountain bikes. And in the process of that, he started sharing the gospel with some Filipinos, and he planted a church on the mountain biking park. And they would meet every Saturday morning. They would study the scriptures, follow Jesus, sing some worship songs, and Gustavo started teaching them how to follow Jesus together. And then they would meet every Saturday at the mountain bike trail. And that little group grew, and it split off into 2 other groups. And now it's gone all the way back to the Philippines, and those guys learned how to share the gospel with their family. And now we have Tagalog speakers who are now learning to follow Jesus in the Philippines because of their family members who lived in Singapore, because of Gustavo, who moved there simply because he was a software engineer who was from Venezuela that came to Christ in Oklahoma City because we shared the gospel and gave him some simple tools. So if you ask, how can we start? The answer is you just work a job, share Jesus, learn how to make disciples, and God does the rest.
If you didn't know by now, we have created the #1 video courses on starting and scaling a pressure washing company on the market.
That's right. But head knowledge will only take you so far. You need the hands-on experience.
So what we crafted for you guys is an Experience Nashville 3-day boot camp. 2 days in the field, learning everything as it relates to pressure and soft washing and how the systems work, and 1 full day of breakout sessions with Joshua and myself. Visit pressurewashingpastor.com, scroll down till you see a link to my calendar. We will grab a call together and figure out how to get you here to Nashville.
And then we will see you in Nashville.
Back to the show.
Mic drop. I am blown away. If you're a listener, if you've just heard this story, you're listening, do us a favor and share this with other people that you know that are inside of ministry, that are thinking about either being business owners or going into ministry. We need to re-identify and rethink through how we think about being missional. The only solution isn't just going into ministry. There are so many different ways that God can utilize our lives to create jobs, make disciples, and serve the city. I've got one last question for you. You've been super helpful. I'm like fired and pumped up. I want to know more, want to learn more, want to chat with you after this. But here's my final question for you. Here's my final question is, if you had one message to leave planet Earth before you left planet Earth, you got tornadoes coming through. Hopefully, everything will be okay. But if you had one message to leave with planet Earth, what message would you want to leave?
Josh, did you have to throw in the fact that we're about to have a spawn of tornadoes before you asked me to give my last message if I was to leave the earth? It's Oklahoma. It's okay. We had 28 tornadoes in one day like a week ago, so it's fine. It's just the way life is here.
I want to make it real, though. Like the questions that I ask about testimony, purpose, work as witness, and then one message is real. We don't know what's going to take place tomorrow, and this life is not what we're here for. There's something greater than what happens in between the dashes, and it's what happens after that last date. And so if you had one message to give before you left planet Earth, what message would it be?
To leave with those people who would still be around, I would say that if you're a follower of Jesus, you have the full rights, responsibilities, and privileges of anyone in the power of the Holy Spirit and in the name of Jesus to be a priest of God in your everyday life. That you have been called by Jesus, and the authority of the kingdom and the totality of the DNA of the kingdom of God and the ability of Jesus has been given to you in the Holy Spirit. And so every single person has every single thing that they need to engage the kingdom, to make disciples, and to see every tribe, tongue, and nation come to the throne of Jesus Christ, regardless of their job, their situation, or their location.
Let's go. And Dave, I want to thank you again for being on our show. Powerful conversations today. And for me, it's like what's next is like to continue to have this conversation, to continue to invite missionaries that are in the marketplace. You currently are a franchisor, is that correct?
Franchisee. Yep, I'm in a franchise myself.
And so you purchased the right to go inside of how did you, I guess we're not even talking about, I'm super curious about a lot of conversations now, but just want to thank you for being a guest. Please share the show. If there's any good that you can walk away from it, it's this, is that God has powered us, put his Holy Spirit in us, have saved us, have sanctified or sanctifying us for the purpose of being ministers in the marketplace. God's not done. You can be used by God to make a difference in the world. And so just calling all ambassadors, calling all missionaries to engage the world through the marketplace. 84% of the world's population is going to be found at work. 6% will show up at max at your local church. Why not start businesses and engage inside of the home service community? Love you guys, and until next time, peace.